I've always wanted to have kids. The very, very beginning. Working with kids, being around kids, I always wanted to be a mom. So that was one thing I was making sure happened. My husband and I were together for many years. We got married. And of course, the first conversation was having kids. We both wanted them. We decided for our first marriage, we were just going to enjoy things. Like
first year of marriage or first marriage?
No, first year of marriage. Sorry.
I too said that to my first husband. We're just going to enjoy ourselves.
We're just going to enjoy
And then
ourselves.
I'm going to marry someone new. Sorry. First year of marriage.
First year. So we just enjoyed ourselves. I didn't really track anything. We just, did our thing, tried. And then after 1 year, it was like, okay, so maybe I should start tracking. Maybe I should start, doing ovulation tests and checking my temperature and doing all that stuff. And so we did. And in November of that year, so that would have been 2018, I didn't get my period. And I thought, hey, cool. Like, I got to be pregnant. My period was to the T on the same month every month. So I never had a late period ever. So I knew exactly when my period was coming. And then in November, when I didn't get it, I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is awesome. So of course you get excited. You're like, oh, okay, didn't get my period. This is awesome. And then I took a pregnancy test. It didn't come up positive. And I was like, hey, this is interesting. I haven't got my period yet and there's no positive test. So I just waited and waited and waited. I never got my period. So I thought, you know what, maybe I should go to my doctor, get some blood work done and figure out what's going on. So that day before I was leaving for a doctor's appointment, I had a really heavy period. And I had a big clot. And I didn't know at this point what this meant or what was going on. I went to my doctor right away. I showed her pictures that I had taken. And she had a thought that I would possibly had a miscarriage. So hearing that was also very hard. But she said at the same time, she wasn't 100% sure. So that was hard to take. And then right away I said, you know what, I want to go for an ultrasound. I think there's something wrong. And she said, no, like, give it some time. You've just started to try to get pregnant. So take some time and I'll go. And I said, no, something's wrong. Like I've always had my period to the T and there's something wrong. So I want to go. So I went for an ultrasound. I got the results back at a walk-in clinic, which was connected to the ultrasound tech that was there. Originally, when I went to pick up my results, he had said, I'll forward them to your doctor so that you can go in and speak to your doctor. But of course, he said, do you want to come in and I can chat with you regarding your results? And I was like, okay, sure. Like I just thought, sure, why not? Like you're going to tell me your results. Why not? And I went in and he looked at me and he said, I'm really sorry to tell you, but you're not going to be able to get pregnant. You're going to have to go straight to IVF. I was devastated. One, I was devastated because he was someone that I didn't even know. And I couldn't believe that he would actually want to share those results with me, knowing that he wasn't even my doctor.
And without giving you any context.
Nothing. It was just like, you're going to have to go right to IVF. So that was really hard to take, especially when we weren't really trying for that long at that point. And so I was devastated. I remember getting in the car and taking the results and crying all the way home. And at this point, my parents were living with us. And my mom was a nurse. And I went home and I showed her the result. And I cried. I said, I'm never going to be a mom. And IVF never, doesn't always work because I had friends in the past that were doing IVF and that didn't work for them. So I was beside myself. I couldn't get over the fact that, this person had told me that I was never going to get pregnant naturally. So moving forward, I went to my doctor and she said, I want you to get some more tests done. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be able to get pregnant, but your uterus is possibly a bicornea or a septic uterus. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And she's kind of like, well, it's kind of like a heart shape. So it has a little dip in it. And then sometimes it can be challenging to get pregnant. And I'm like, okay, so what do I do moving forward? And she's like, well, let's do 6 months of trying. And then if things come up, then we'll refer you to an IVF clinic. I didn't want to believe her. I was like, no, this is not right. I don't feel right. Wasn't really happy with my doctor at that point too. So I was actually at school one day and a friend was going through IVF and a parent overheard a conversation. And she's like, I have someone that you can see. You can get some ultrasounds done. You can get in quick. His name's Dr. Sweet. So I was like, oh, he's sweet. Maybe can bring me some sweetness here. So I went and saw him. He got me in really quick. I was in within 6 weeks. And he then told me that I didn't have a bicornea uterus. I had an acute uterus. And I'm like, what the heck does this mean? And he's like, it's just, like a little dip in your uterus, but like you can get pregnant naturally. Like that shouldn't stop you from getting pregnant. And I was like, okay. And he's like, just make sure you're eating healthy and like, doing normal things. And I'm like, yeah, I eat healthy and I exercise. I was into fitness, very hard time. And I was like, should I slow down? He's like, no, just, and then he's like, make sure you're tracking and ovulation and all that stuff. So I was like, okay. And he's like, but I'm going to put you on the list for an IVF. And I was like, okay, cool. And he's like, it could be, 2 years, a year, but just in case like things don't work out, at least you're on a list because I know it takes a long time to get on. Mark and I continued to try and try and try. And it got to the point where it wasn't fun. Like it wasn't enjoyable. We didn't enjoy ourselves. We're getting stressed out and we weren't big drinkers, let alone, but like we loved going in the hot tub and like doing things like this. And I've now heard that it wasn't a great thing to do, but that's kind of what we did. We enjoyed going in there as some time together. But it was hard because like all my friends were getting pregnant. Everyone around me was getting pregnant. And like announcements and all that, like it was hard. It was really, really hard. You feel alone. You feel like, it's only you. And it was devastating. It was really hard to move forward on things. So we finally got the call that we could start IVF. And, looking back, I was like, oh, sweet. Like I'll just do my egg retrieval and I'll do one transfer and it will work. Like I thought it was simple. I didn't look at it as all these appointments and blood work and all this stuff. I was terrified because I have a fear of needles and I knew that was something that I would have to do all the time. But my husband was very supportive and was on board and he actually did all of my needles for me. So so we did an egg retrieval. I ended up with 12 eggs. I was super excited. And then we only ended up with 3 blasts. So that was kind of a little bit hard to accept too, because, I was like, well, my uterus is the only problem here. Like, why am I only getting 3 eggs out of all this? Anyways, we moved on forward.
I think that's important too, because one of the realities that I talk a lot about in terms of IVF is fertility math, which patients aren't made aware of when they start the process. Even with like little tips, like looking at your estrogen right before your retrieval and seeing how, like in the thousands, how many thousands is your estrogen? Mm-hmm. And that can be a good indicator. Let's say you have 10, mature follicles, but your estrogen is only about 5,000. We can gauge for the most part that you might get like 5 to 6 mature eggs.
Yeah.
And I think having that, expectation versus reality is so helpful for patients. Mm-hmm. And to know that it's totally normal to go from 12 retrieved to X number fertilized, X number getting to day 3 to X number making it to day 5 to X number being PGT or genetically normal.
Yeah.
And throwing somebody into a retrieval and then saying, okay, you've got 12 retrieved. Let's see how this goes. Yeah. And then for you to even now be sitting here and thinking, well, I only ended up with 3 embryos. Like that's so rough.
Yeah.
But is actually pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. And now that I look back, I'm like, yeah, that is really good because, hearing other stories of women only getting like 1 or none during a retrieval, right?
Right.
But I should backtrack that I did do IUIs. I did 2 IUIs prior to that. I ended up with 1 miscarriage and then 1 that didn't work. And then that's when we went right into IVF. But like you said, like I didn't know I had to go in every other day for blood work or every other day to check to see if my follicles were growing. Like it was a lot. I had to take a lot of time off work. I was also going into getting permanent for school and I wasn't sure if that was going to affect my job. That was very challenging to work around too. And I just had to accept that like, this was my life now and this is what I needed to do. And so I had to just, do it. I had to book the time off that I needed. And I knew my appointments were in advance, then I would book it in advance. But otherwise I just, I had some great partners throughout before I got permanent and they were very understanding. And that too, like, I didn't share my story. I didn't talk about it. Like, a lot of people had said, like, you and Mark have been together for like 12 years. Like, when are you having kids? It was terrible. Yeah, I got through, and it's just like, I never shared my story. And it wasn't till we struggled going into our first round of IVF that I shared, like, Mark came home and I was like, I have to look for support somewhere. I'm not getting it. No one knows. Like, I need to talk to someone. And it wasn't until one of my best friends told me, like, I think you need to start talking to someone. Like, you're not yourself. Like, you look very depressed and stuff. And she's like, you know, like, we don't understand. Like, we haven't gone through this. So, like, you need to go find those people that, like, understand. And I think I finally was like, you know what, if I share my story, like, maybe I'll have people that will be able to, like, speak to me regarding this. And so that's when I did. And I shared my story. And honestly, it opened up so many eyes for me. I went into so many support groups to help me through a lot of things. So
where did you share?
I shared on social media.
Right. Okay.
And I ended up getting like a lot of people that actually had gone through it.
Wow.
And as well that assisted me with where to go for support groups. I did join a fertility method that I met some great support people. This was through the States though.
Right.
And it was an interesting time because I wasn't able to see any of these people, but we did once a week where we got to chat and vent about like everything that was going on. So that was very helpful.
This like over Zoom or?
Yes, it was over Zoom.
Right.
So I never really got to meet those people or see them physically, but we chatted, we had our group chat and stuff like that. And, you know, this method was, you know, change your diet and, you know, don't work out as much and, you know, don't drink any alcohol and, you know, maybe enjoy some milk thistle tea.
Ugh.
Which I know Anne loves.
So disgusting.
So I did. I was like, you know what? Maybe this is something that's going to work. Like, maybe I'll just throw in all this into my thing. I'm going into a transfer. Like, yeah, let's do it. And my husband's like, it's not going to work. Like, you know, you've tried all these things. Like, do you really think this place is going to work? But I thought, you know what? Why not try? So we went through our first IVF.
You like gave up coffee.
I gave up coffee.
You gave up all alcohol.
I gave up all alcohol.
You were eating.
I gave up fitness.
Almost nothing.
Yeah.
And drinking
fish,
water that tasted like nothing.
A lot of fish. I'm not a fish eater.
A lot of fish.
I ate a lot of fish. And
you washed it down with some milk thistle water.
And went like full on like gluten-free, organic, you know, and I do now eat organic food, but like everything gluten. I barely ate like bread of any form.
Yeah. You're just trying to get some like, control though.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was such a
But it was awful. It was terrible. And like coffee was my thing. Like working, teaching, being up with kids, like people would be like, I'm going for a coffee run. Like, do you want one? And I'm like, no, I can't. Want a tea? No, couldn't drink tea. And like water, I guess I'll just continue drinking my lemon water, which I continue to do. So yes, our first transfer ended up in a chemical. I was told we didn't get our eggs tested. The reason why we didn't get our eggs tested is my doctor was very like, you're young and like, I don't think you have great reserve. And like, I really don't think that you need to be tested. And I was like, are you sure?
How old were you at the time? Because you look like you're 12 now, so I can't.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I want to say I was 32.
Okay. Wow.
32. Yeah.
And he was supportive of your age.
Yeah.
I feel like if you went now, 32.
They'd be like, you're 36.
They're like, oh my God, you should have been in here 12 years ago. You're like, I'm in university. Like,
oh,
it's too late.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So chemical was hard. But I was like, you know what? It was my first time. Not every time works. So I've heard that not all of the first time of IVF works. So I was like, okay. So I asked her like what the next steps were going to be. And she's like, you know, we'll change a little bit of your medication and, you know, we'll start do another round. And I was like, okay, cool. So I just thought, you know what? I'll just up my medication. It'll all be good.
Are they doing like medicated?
Yeah. I was doing medicated.
So a lot of estrogen.
Injections as well.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So
and
modified?
Yeah.
Natural?
Yeah.
Or just medication?
No, medication, but I also did injections as well.
Okay. So it was very medicated.
Very medicated.
So were they hoping to have you ovulate and then 6 days later do a transfer?
Yes.
Okay. So it was a modified natural with estrogen.
Yes.
What a wonderful choice for an endo patient.
But it's funny because like, honestly, I didn't know a lot about IVF and what to do and where to move forward with things. So I didn't know the questions to ask. I didn't know what things to ask. Like, should I be doing more ultrasound? Should I be going for an MRI? Is there something wrong with my ovaries? Like, I never asked any of those things. I was just like, okay, second, let's do it. Let's do it again.
But then what's nuts though is like, why should you
I know.
have had to advocate for investigation? You know, you were 32 at this point. Was it 2020? So then you started at 30. Wouldn't we have questions as to why things weren't working? I don't know.
And like I like, and some people that had gone through it, like one of my girlfriends had gone through it, and she's like, you should ask this next time. Like, you should ask this next time. And you know, I learned as I went, but like, I wish I knew prior. Like, I wish I had that person prior to be like, this is what you're going to deal with when you're going through. This is what you need to ask and stuff. Because I had no idea. I had no friends that went through this. I was the only one.
Right.
So that was hard. That was really hard. So I went into my second transfer, and like, my husband and I were really hopeful. Like, we were like, this is going to work. Like, this is the second time, like, blah, blah, blah. So I went into my transfer, and then within a week, I felt different. Like, I felt different than my first transfer. And I was like, oh my God, maybe this worked. But I wasn't the type to do pregnancy tests prior. Like, I didn't want to get my hopes up. I've heard a lot of people that do like a false positive and then, you know, in the end are not. So I was like, you know what, I'm not going to test. And my husband and I both talked about it. Like, I'm not going to test. So I didn't test at all. But I did feel different. Like, I felt nauseous. My boobs hurt, very tired. And I was like, this has to work. I was going in to get my beta test. And once again, I had a very, very heavy clot that came. And my levels had shown that I was pregnant, but it was at the scheme. So it was like 6 or 7. And I know it has to be past a 5. So they're like, oh, like, but I had a clot that previous night. So they had called originally before I had the clot. They had called and said, you know, you are pregnant, but it's at that borderline. So we're going to see if your numbers double or go up, and we'll go from there. And that night I ended up with a really big clot and lots of bleeding, and it was confirmed that I had a miscarriage. So I was devastated. I was like, this is it for me. Like, I have one more egg. Like, I want more kids. Like, I don't think I can put myself through this egg retrieval again. I honestly, I was lost. I was lost without words. I went to a very depressed mode, I'll be honest. I stopped seeing people. I stayed in, and, you know, COVID hit at this point too. I was devastated. Like, I was done. I started to understand that, like, maybe I will never have kids, and I need to start thinking about the fact that my life may not be as a mom. And it was hard. My husband and I had a really hard time. I know, went into a little bit of depression as well. I don't think he would admit it, but, you know, he didn't like talking about it. You know, people would ask, he didn't want to mention anything about it. And we stopped going out to like gatherings and stuff with people. And I think it was just like, we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do moving forward. And then one day, a girlfriend, an old colleague actually in high school, messaged me and said, I think you need to go see Anne. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I think you need to go and see Anne.
The time has come.
And at this point, I was like, I've tried everything. Like, what is she, like, this is what I thought. What is she going to do to help me? Like, I've been everywhere. I've tried to do this. I've tried to do that. And now you're trying to tell me that I need to go to Toronto and see a person for acupuncture?
From
How
Hamilton.
is acupuncture going to work?
No less.
Like, how is acupuncture going to work?
I still don't know.
So I was like, okay, like, maybe I should just do it. I can do it on a Saturday. I'll go Saturday mornings. You know, maybe acupuncture. I've heard acupuncture is great. So maybe I'll start like doing that. And you know what? Maybe it will work. I don't know. Like, at this point, I was like, why not? Why not give it a try? And my husband was also done with this clinic. We were very upset about the last transfer that happened. Our nurse didn't call like afterwards for a follow-up. And then she left the clinic. And so I was going to have a brand new person. And I felt like I had to explain everything to them again. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm like, if I'm going to have a brand new person, maybe I should look at somewhere else to go. And then I heard that this clinic wasn't very good. And I was like, great. So I just wasted 2 transfers at this clinic. Like, I didn't know what clinic was good and what clinic wasn't. And so I ended up going to private, and I saw this lovely guy, and he was very sweet. And that's when I was diagnosed with endo. And he did an ultrasound, and he's like, have you ever been told, like an MRI too? And he's like, have you ever been told that you have endo? And I was like, no. He's like, do you have heavy periods? And I was like, at the beginning, but like, no, like I have my periods before I tried getting pregnant were normal. And he's like, yeah, so I'll try a couple medicated cycles with you and we'll go from there. And I was like, okay. And he's like, but you possibly need surgery. And I was like, surgery? He's like, yeah, like we're going to see, like I need to go in to see how bad it is because an MRI may not show up like fully about what's going on.
It's interesting too, because they just published a study on fertility and sterility where they have found that FETs, like frozen embryo transfers, with endo patients has a significantly lower live birth rate, which is incredibly important because it calls into question the idea that whether you have endo or not doesn't matter when doing transfers.
Yeah.
Which, endo responds very poorly to estrogen.
Yeah. And I was on a lot of estrogen.
On a lot of estrogen.
A lot of estrogen. Now that I look back, yes, I was on a lot of it.
Yeah.
And so he was very good about that. He's like, no, I'm not going to put you on this. I'm not going to put you on that. Like, and I would tell him about previous. And he's like, I don't know why they put you on so much estrogen. And I was like, well, they never would move forward with other tests. Like if I asked.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like at this point, I was like, it's a money grabber. Like they don't care about me. All they care about is getting money for like there's nothing. And he cared, like he put in the effort to, like if I had questions or anything, like, yep, you want to come for an ultrasound? Yep, come for an ultrasound. Let's see what's going on.
He was a real doctor.
He was a real doctor, but he was going to retire. So I was like, great, I'm going to have this guy and then he's going to retire. And then what? Another doctor, a new doctor? I ended up doing a medical, like he medicated me and we just tried naturally. I ended up like reacting to the medication. I got cysts, like growing cysts. I can't remember the term of it, but
was it an oral medication?
Yeah, oral medication.
Probably letrozole.
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And I had cysts that built up on my ovaries, and they went from like 1 centimeter to 5 centimeters within a week of being on the medication. And he's like, "Yeah, no, like this isn't gonna work." So I had surgery. Really tough. It was a really tough surgery. It was very long. They had found a cyst as well on my ovaries that they did deal with, as well as endo all over. He said it's not like severe, but I think it would, it might help you in the long run with the surgery. So I recovered from that. And he just originally said, like, I think you got to try IVF again. And I was like, I don't think I can. He's like, that's honestly what the next step is now. Like you've had surgery, like we've done this. Like I think maybe this time it will work for you. So I was like, okay. And he's like, so like you're going to go to 1. And I was like, no, I'm not. I was just there. I'm not going to 1. He's like, well, it's great. Like you should, go back and you have your egg supply there. Like go back. I think that's a great place. And I was thinking in my head, like, no, like I'm not going back to a place that, didn't work out for me. And the doctors, I'm sorry, were awful.
It's really interesting because the physicians only think about it from the perspective of what they've heard from other physicians. Mm-hmm. Nobody's taking into consideration the feedback from patients.
Yeah.
So you have, GPs and gynecologists referring to the same clinics again and again without thinking, we should take a moment and call some of these patients that we referred to these clinics and see what their experience was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, they are physicians. When I'm treating physicians, they have a really hard time going to fertility clinics because they can't wrap their brains around the fact that these clinics are not operating in the same way that other medical offices do.
And it was hard too, because I know people have been successful at one.
Yes.
But I know some people have different views of different places.
If you throw enough spitballs at the wall, a few of them are going to stick. You know,
Yeah.
you tell
Yeah.
every 26-year-old that she's going to need IVF,
Yeah.
then you're going to have success.
Yeah.
It's the more complicated cases where, like, what's your success rate with endo patients?
Yeah.
Like, what's your success rate with diminished ovarian reserve?
Well, and I feel like they didn't even like look at that for me.
Right.
So
No, they
like,
didn't even know.
they had no idea. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, it's okay. Like, you're fine. You're healthy. You're young. It's
Right.
going to work.
Yes.
Okay. Can we go into more details? Because clearly something is wrong. And that's what I kept saying. Something is wrong. Something's wrong with me. Something like there's something else that's missing here in the missing piece. And they just wouldn't move forward. Like I asked for an ERA, like at this point, like everything, like maybe we should test my eggs. Like, is it my eggs? Blah, blah. No. Let's do another round. Let's do another round. Let's do another round. So I was like, I'm not going back to one. So a friend of mine was like, why don't you try Trio? And Trio was in Toronto, which is hard because like I'm in Hamilton, Toronto, and I know the appointments are like every other day. And I'm like, how am I going to be able to get there every other day for appointments?
Yeah.
And they had said that there was a Niagara facility where you could go and do blood work. You would just have to come to Trio for like your transfers and your egg retrieval and stuff like that. And I was like, okay. And they're like, we correspond. So, you know, whatever happens at that place will be correspond back to your doctor. And I'm like, okay, perfect. This will work for me because it was close. So I was like, I remember leaving that acupuncture and going home and telling my husband. He's like, oh, Lord. I'm like, what are we going to do?
I'd just taken away all of your tea. That made you start drinking coffee again.
Honestly, when I came and saw you and I told you exactly what was going on, you're like, girl, you're not living your life.
Bad life.
Like, I'm a very fitness orientated person. I worked out like 4 or 5 times a week. And that helped me, especially going through IVF. And then when people were like, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do this. You do some yoga. And I'm like, I went to one yoga class ever. And the girl actually asked me to stop talking.
I can't.
Like,
I can't be involved with anything like that.
I couldn't sit there in peace and quiet and do breathing masks. Like I like to move my body. I like to talk about other people that are working out. Like yoga was not for me.
You're a live
I can't
wire.
even sit still, let alone lie on a floor and do yoga.
No.
I was like, there's no way. So I quit fitness altogether. And I think that's what really like made my depression worse because so when you saw and you're like, no, like you can do fitness, like you can drink coffee. I'm like, I can drink coffee. So then I started to like, you know, enjoy a little bit more coffee. And like, I wasn't crazy about working out, but like I went back into working out again. So
I'm posting more and more about fitness and fertility because there's a lot of misconceptions around what certain patients can and cannot do.
or how much.
But ultimately, physical activity helps with balancing estrogen, especially in endo patients, and modulating the immune system, which in most patients with endo is also problematic.
Yeah.
So helping your mental, but also helping your physical body with the appropriate amount of working out. It's really odd, this perception of like women being these fragile creatures who have to only do yoga, which by the way is really hard. So that in itself is a misconception. I can't touch my toes. I can barely touch my knees. There we go. But why would that be better than going for a run?
I loved running too.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that.
It's so bizarre. If you're getting your period and you're ovulating, it's clearly not impacting.
And it helped. Like it helped a lot.
Yes.
So I went back to the gym. You said you could work out. So I'm like, okay, I'm going back to the gym. And I felt like I started to see myself again when I was back in the gym and doing what I loved. You know, something that I was trying to get pregnant and becoming a mom, which wasn't happening for me. But at least I was back to where I liked, and it was the gym and working out. And so like, that's what I did. I started working out. I started drinking coffee again. I started, you know, going out and seeing people again because I just felt like I wasn't living my life. And I started to believing in like, okay, like maybe this won't happen now. Maybe this won't happen in a year, but it's going to happen. Some way or another, it's going to happen. And you really helped me with that. You really helped me, you know, think positive and have hope. And, look outside the boxes, because I didn't. I lost a lot of my hope. I lost a lot of, I can do this when I was at my worst, and seeing you changed my life. And I don't think I would be where I am today without you. I just want to say that. Like, you are, and every woman out there that has been successful because of you is probably thinking the exact same thing as I'm saying. You are a hero to those women out there.
I did it all by giving you back the lives you already had.
But let me say, my success of this all is that I ended up, everyone says, don't stress. I tried my best not to stress. Mark and I agreed that we would do one more round of IVF. One more round, and if it wasn't successful, then that was kind of it for us, because I didn't think that I could physically put my body through that. One of the ultrasounds came back that I had a septic uterus, but my wall was
like
split.
a septate.
Yeah, my wall was completely split. That's when they were like, because of these miscarriages, I don't think you're going to be able to have a child full term. So maybe you need to think about surrogacy. That was a whole other topic to swallow, because
a lot of information that you were given as like a drip.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here's the first bit of bad news. Here's the next bit of bad news. Then they're going back and forth between what is and what is not, which is wild because it was a physiological state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, there shouldn't be an opinion on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should just be or not be.
And the other thing that they said too is that my tube was blocked. I'm like, why wasn't that seen at my other ultrasound? I had thousands of ultrasounds.
And sonos.
Why wasn't this seen? That possibly could be why, one of the reasons why your last transfer ended up the way it did. And he's like, so we're going to have to, I want to do another sonogram, but we're going to have to remove that tube. It was my left tube. And he's like, I want to do all of this before we
Did you say there was fluid in it?
Yeah, there was fluid in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was a hydro.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's like, I think it's just best to remove it. And I was like, okay, well, at this point, I'm like, if I'm going to go through IVF, I might as well just remove it. But it was a hard pill to swallow. And then like surrogacy on top of it. Like, if I'm going to do another IVF round, like maybe I should just save my eggs and go surrogacy way then. Like, if this is what's going to happen with my uterus.
Right.
So what happened was I ended up coming to Acu, and I had a celebration of life to go to on a Saturday after Acu. And we were going into surgery, I needed to have an egg retrieval first before they were going to remove things, because he wasn't sure if my ovaries were going to have to be removed too. So he's like, I want you to do an egg retrieval first, and then after your egg retrieval, we would do surgery before we think about doing any transfers or what your next steps are going to be. So I was like, okay. So I was supposed to go in October, and September I was leading up to like this egg retrieval. So, of course I was trying to really be careful about the things that I was doing. Came to you for acupuncture. Then I went to a celebration of life, and I was with a lot of family, like my god sisters. I love them to death. And they were like, Britt, can you just have a drink with us, please? Like, I haven't seen you be yourself in so many years. Like, let's just have a drink. Like, we're celebrating such an important man in our life. Like, let's have a drink. And I was like, I can't. Like, I'm going into an egg retrieval in like 3 weeks. Like, I want to be clean and clear and blah, blah. And she's like, I don't think one drink's going to hurt. And I'm like, all right, you know what? Let's do it. I had a drink. And then she's like, I think you should just enjoy the night with me. Like, you don't let loose. Like, your egg retrieval is in October. It's fine. It's mid-October, late October, right? Yeah, you're fine. Like, just have a couple more drinks with me. And I was like, my anxiety was kicking in, but I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, haven't been out with you. She's like, we haven't seen you in so long. Like, it's fine. So one drink ended up another. And then I was like, okay, I got to stay the night now. So I stayed the night. I had the best night of my life, celebrating such an important man in our lives that passed, and celebrating it with the best people in the world. I had the time of my life. I felt like myself. I felt like I could be normal. And I was like, this is amazing. I got up the next morning and I was like, oh my God, I'm going through an egg retrieval in 4 weeks. What have I done to my body? How do I reject all this stuff in my body that I just did? But I was like, you know what? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I had the best time of my life. So 2 weeks later, I got COVID. And I was like, this sucks.
Cannot catch a break.
I can't catch a break. So I was supposed to go to go into an egg retrieval in October. They had to cancel because they're like, it's important that, you get that out of your system. We'll wait a month. So we'll wait till November. We'll do some more ultrasounds, figure out what's going on, and then we'll move forward. But right now, you have COVID. We're going to take a break. So I was like, okay. So I got COVID. I was really sick. I got COVID really bad. And I was like, great. It's probably because I was partying and I haven't partied in so long. And then I was like, I stopped tracking my period a long time ago. And I thought to myself, oh, I haven't on my period yet. This is weird. And this was after COVID. And then a lot of people said, oh, maybe it's because you got COVID. It can affect your period, all that stuff. And I was like, okay. So I didn't think anything of it. October came around and I was like, this is weird. I think it's been a long time since I've had my period. I went back to my app and I was 3 weeks late. And I was like, what? This isn't possible. I'll never forget this day. October 15th, 2022. Or 2023, sorry.
2022.
No, 2022.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also will never forget.
I took a test and it instantly came up positive. My husband was still sleeping. Instantly. And I was like, no, this can't be real. This can't be real. I was possibly going to do surrogacy, because I wasn't going to be able to get pregnant and go into term. So instantly then I thought okay, I'm pregnant, but this isn't going to be a viable pregnancy because I knew that the doctor had told me that the liability of having a full-term baby is very slim because of your uterus. And I was like, oh my God. But I'm like, no, this test, I'm like, I got to do another one. So I did another one, instantly came out positive. I'm like, I'm shitting bricks here. What? So then I was like, I got to do one more. So I took one more, instantly came up. I started bawling, I'm trying not to get emotional, but I started bawling because I'm like, oh my God. In January, they told me that I was never going to get pregnant naturally. And I'm pregnant. So I've proved all these doctors wrong. So I went into the bedroom and I woke up my husband. I will never forget this. And I took the test and I showed his eyes. He's like, that's not real. I'm like, no, babe, look, it's positive. It's positive. I haven't got my period, blah, blah. And he's like, well, let's just wait. Let's go. And we were both cautious because I'd been through this before. It's like, no, let's just wait. Let's not tell anyone. Let's keep it quiet. Let's give it a week before you see a doctor. And I'm like, I got to call my mom. So I called my mom, FaceTimed her. And she's like, oh my God, you have COVID. I'm like, Mom, this is a pregnancy test. It's not COVID. I'm like, I'm pregnant. And my sister-in-law was actually there. So then she knew. And she's like, oh my God. I'm like, I don't know what to do. What do I do? Do I call a doctor? I don't know what to do. And she's like, you need to book a doctor's appointment. You need to move forward on this. So Mark and I were like, oh my God, this can't be real. And I was like, babe, I think I'm going to go to Shoppers and I'm going to get a pregnancy test that tells me how many weeks. He's like, babe, you've taken 4 pregnancy tests. I think you're pregnant. I'm like, no, I'm going to go to Shoppers. So I drove to Shoppers, got a week's one that shows the weeks, the blue clear ones or whatever, brought it home. Well, because I was so excited, I took the wrong test. I didn't take the weeks one. I just took a positive one with a smiley face. Comes up with a smiley face. And I was like, oh my God, I need to do a new one. He's like, no, I think you should save that one. You've now done 5 tests. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm pregnant, October 15th. I'm like, oh my God. And I sent you a message. I was like, what do I do? I'm supposed to go into an egg retrieval. I guess I should call Dr. Kadeski. So I called my doctor. Mark's like, wait a week. No, I called. Monday morning I called. And I said, I took a pregnancy test and I came out positive. I don't know whether or not this is true or not. And she's like, okay, I'll send you for blood work. And I was like, okay. Went for blood work. Got an instant call back. Yep, you're pregnant. you're pregnant. And I was like, okay, so this is real. Like the test came back positive. The blood work came back positive. I'm pregnant. I went to school that day and my friend went through IVF and I couldn't hold it in. I'm like, I need to tell her. Like out of all people, I need to tell her. I went in, she was sitting at her desk. I'll never forget this. It was just before like the bell rang in the morning. And I walked up to her and I was like, I'm pregnant. And she started like bawling. She gave me a hug and she's like, oh my God, like naturally? And I was like, yeah. I'm like, I don't know what to do. She's like, okay, call and he'll do a beta test. And then that way you can find out what your beta is. And I was like, okay. So I called him and he's like, I need to send you for blood work. And I'm like, can I not forward you the blood work from my doctor? And he's like, no, I need to do my own blood work. So I was like, okay. So that day after work, I went to got blood work done. He called me the next morning and was like, yep, you are pregnant. Your numbers are extremely high and you need to get an ultrasound ASAP. And I was like, what does this mean? So I went in and I told my friend and she's like, oh my God, you could be having twins. And I'm like, no, there's no way I'm having twins. There's no way. So I went for my first ultrasound and I was 6 weeks and 5 days.
There was already a heartbeat.
And I was like, oh my God, this is real. Like, this is real. Like, I can actually be a little bit excited that I'm pregnant. So you honestly don't know really how to feel or how to take it because you've been through so much. And then suddenly
it was 4 years at this point. Yeah.
And suddenly I was like, oh my God, this is like real. So yeah, so we were very quiet about it. We didn't tell people about it. Like a lot of my close friends didn't know. My parents knew, his parents knew. We kept it quiet. And then at 9 weeks, I think it was 9 weeks, I started to bleed. And I was like, shit, like this is the end for me. And so we rushed to the hospital and I had an ultrasound and they couldn't find the baby. And they're like, well, like your levels are really high. Like they're moving up. And I remember I was messaging you and you're like, don't worry. Like it's probably a subchorionic hemorrhage. Like they're not figuring it out. And I was like, well, the doctors are telling me that they can't find the baby. Like this is a problem. And then she was like, well, maybe you're having an ectopic pregnancy. And I was like, no. I'm not having an ectopic pregnancy because I just had an ultrasound the past week. And like, I saw it. Like I saw the sac, the heartbeat and everything. There's no way I'm having an ectopic pregnancy. And so she's like, okay, we're going to rush you to MAC. And I'm like, okay, like, what does this mean? And she's like, we need to make sure that you're not having an ectopic pregnancy. So I rushed to MAC.
Which is crazy. Like, why wouldn't they have had record of your previous ultrasounds that were in utero?
Yeah. So Mark and I were crying all the way to MAC because we thought, like, this is the end for us.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting at home on my blue lounge chair being like, they're going to tell me about the subchorionic hematoma.
So yeah, they rushed me to MAC and they took me in instantly. Blah, blah. And the ultrasound tech was like, so why did they rush you to MAC? As I'm lying there or whatever. She's like, yeah, your baby's right here. You have a strong heartbeat. And like the moment of like, over my shoulders. She's like, yeah. She's like, I'll let the doctor speak to you about, more information. But like, yeah, you're all good. Like you're pregnant. There's a baby there. You have a great heartbeat. You're all good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
It's always the gush of blood that I feel quite confident by.
And that wasn't the first time throughout this pregnancy that I like gushed blood. So I went up, we sat, Mark and I were like a little bit more like, whew, okay, this is good. We're good. The doctor came in and was like, okay, so you have a subchorionic hemorrhage. And I'm like, Anne told me this. Mark was like, yep, Anne was probably right again. I was like, this woman she's right with everything. She just listened to her and never went to back. Because I've been here for hours.
Yeah. It's nuts.
Hours. Nuts. So yeah, she's like, okay, so like, we'll just have to monitor it. Like, if you have a little bit of blood, it's fine. It's all normal. And you just want to hope that it doesn't grow. And I was like, okay. And like where it is. She's like, where it is in your uterus is not going to affect the baby. And I was like, okay, cool. So at 10 weeks, I don't know if you remember this, but I went for an ultrasound. And one of the ultrasound techs was like, oh, did they check your right side? And I'm like, what? What do you mean did they check my right side? And she's like, well, your uterus is a little bit different. There could be another sac on the right side.
I do remember this.
And I was like, there's no sac on the right side. That's not possible. Like, pretty phenomenal that I got pregnant naturally, let alone another sac on the other side. So my doctor called and she's like, so there is a sac on the other side, but it's not growing where it needs to be. So it is possible that it's not going to be a baby. And I was like, oh my God, so I had twins?
So you did have twins.
So I had twins?
Your friend was right.
Yeah.
The HCG.
High levels of HCG. She said instantly that I had twins. So at that point, I was shocked. Like, I was happy that I was pregnant and I knew I was pregnant and that baby was good. I don't think I really digested that I had another baby on the other side. And I think it was just like I was already hopeful and that I had this miracle that was already growing. So I don't think it hit me until later on that I was like, oh my God, I did have another baby. Like, what would have been like if I had twins? Like, Mark and I have always talked about 2 kids. So I was like, that's perfect. So I didn't really digest it until later on. And that's when I had I had my moment. I was upset. I was sad. I was, of course this would happen to me and stuff like that. But in the other side of it, I was like, I have a miracle baby.
And actually, thank God, given your uterus.
Yes.
And the reduced size.
Yes.
That it wasn't twins.
Yes.
That would have been problematic.
Yeah. And I know you had said that too, is that on the good side, it is probably better off because it could have had a lot more complications going in. Honestly, once I started growing my belly and I got to see what it was like, it was cool. But I'll be honest, I wish I enjoyed it a little bit more. I didn't enjoy it that much because I was such on eggshells throughout it all.
Yeah.
I was told so much prior of what could happen. And I honestly wanted to wait till 24-week mark to be okay, this is going to end up with a baby.
Yeah.
But even at the 24 mark too, I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, you kept waiting to feel relieved.
The movement, the relief of 24 weeks. Now, she moved. It's so funny. Good old Jamie. Jamie, I love you. I went out for lunch with her one day and we had acu with you that morning. And I told her that I had all these weird butterflies in my stomach. And she's like, that's the baby moving. That is movement. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah, that's the baby moving. And from that day on, I started feeling the baby. She's like, you're going to find a little bit more ease now that you can feel a baby. And she gave me a Doppler so that I could check in on the baby at all times. Now, I don't know if it's always the best to get a Doppler because you're like, oh my God, am I going to find this? Is this the right heartbeat? Is it still making the horse thumpings? But at the same time, my husband and I loved it. He wasn't able to come to ultrasounds with me all the time because of work. So we were able to be at home at night and be able to hear the baby's heartbeat. So we enjoyed those little moments too. So yeah, I got pregnant naturally. I couldn't believe it. I got past 24 weeks. I got a midwife. I had an OB as well, just because of the circumstances.
I remember he told you too. This was another moment. It was December. What was it? December 21st or 22nd. And he had told you, you're good. You don't need to see me. You're not high risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you left me a voicemail being like, should I believe him? I think I am high risk. Should I just stay there? What if he won't see me? I was like, we should probably take a cue from his book. I think he knows.
Honestly, yeah. Because I was like, you need to see me all the time. I need to have an ultrasound every week. I need to make sure that this baby's growing. Yes, it has. And he's like, you're fine. Just enjoy it. I'm like, I don't know if I can ever enjoy this. He's like, no, you're pregnant. This is going to happen. This is going to work. You're going to be fine. And you kept saying the same thing. You're going to be fine. Everything's going to work out. You're going to have this pressure baby on the outside, blah, blah, blah. So yeah. So then I got up to 34 weeks and the baby wasn't growing. And I heard, like my OB had said, like, you are small, you have a smaller uterus. So the chances of you having a smaller baby is very high. And he said, and that's okay. Like, it's totally fine. It's all good. And I don't know if you remember this, but I had an ultrasound and they're like, yeah, the femur is a little bit shorter than normal. And I'm like, so something's wrong with my baby?
We're like, Anne.
I'm like, Anne.
This baby is going to be so short.
And she's not.
What are we going to do?
And you're like, all the ultrasounds can be
I'm
off.
pretty sure they said my son was going to be 12 pounds. Not the case.
So the due date was June 18th. And because of the growth of her, they figured that we weren't going to go all the way to full term. And so I had a planned C-section, and I actually got to choose the date, which was kind of cool. So I wanted my OB to be there. And so he had 2 dates. I went into the appointment and he's like, okay, like I had weekly ultrasounds at this point. And the last week we were going to make a decision whether or not we could wait or it would be better off. And so that day I saw him and he's like, okay, like we can do a C-section next week. And I'm like, okay, when can we do it? And he's like, well, you have a choice. You can either do it the 6th or you can either do it the 8th. And I was like, I'm going to choose the first day. I want the 6th. And he's like, okay, June 6th, 10 a.m.
So good.
And I was like,
6, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Just 2 times 3 is 6.
It's actually the 6th year that we'd been trying. So it was 6, and the 6th month. So like, I was like,
she's actually not demonic at all.
I'm like, this is amazing. This means something.
Yeah.
This highly means something. So I was super nervous about a C-section. I had some girlfriends that had a C-section before, so kind of prepped me in to like do it and stuff. And yeah, we went in on June 6th, and because my C-section was an emergency, they had to push it back. And I think that was a lot of like an anxiety too. Like, I want this baby out. I want to make sure that she's good. They also had the NICU team come in because on the ultrasound, it had said that she was only 5 pounds.
Right.
And so they wanted to bring them in to let us know that it is possible that, you know, when you have her, she possibly will need to go to the NICU. So Mark and I had to prep ourselves that like, oh, she's going to be fine. Like, Mac's a great hospital. Oh my God, if I can speak. And she may have to go in the NICU. And so I liked that they came in and they spoke to us. I think it relieved me. And the nurse, amazing nurse, she's like, you can ask me as many questions as you want. And my husband's like, you do realize that that's all she's going to do for the next like hours until we have our C-section.
Wild offering.
And she's yeah. He's like, you have now gained yourself some questions that are going to be coming for you 24/7. She's like, it's fine. Totally fine. Whatever I can do to ease your mind and help you, you can ask as many questions. Well, I asked that girl probably 1,000 questions. I swear, at the end of my C-section, she's probably like, thank God she's gone.
Like, drags her body to the parking garage.
So they ended up, I ended up having a C-section at 12:30. She was born actually at 12:55. But leading up, I was like, what's the needle like? What's going to happen? Like, am I going to be paralyzed from my hips down? Because I've heard so many different stories about an epidural.
Right.
I was terrified. But the doctors were amazing. They talked me through it. Everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be normal. And I do have an ASD, so I have to be monitored more for my heart.
Right.
So I was also like concerned about that too. And he's like, no, everything's good. Like, I'm going to talk you through this. Everything's going to be fine. You're going to feel pressure, like everything. And before you know it, she came out and she was 5'13". So she did not have to see an ICU. I could pick her up right away and hold her in my arm. Well, I couldn't really hold her in my arms, but like I could have her chest to chest. And honestly, it was the best moment of my life. Mark and I have always wanted to have a girl, and we got our girl. And she is my life. She's changed me. I've never been so happy. And I feel like it's really brought our marriage, Mark and I's marriage, closer. Like, we went through a lot, and I felt like going through all those struggles, it brought us closer together.
Right.
And I feel like when she came, it was like a relief off of both of us that we have, a baby that's survived and something that we never thought was ever going to happen. I look back and I'm like, oh my God, 6 years of struggle and don't do this, don't do that. See this doctor. And every single doctor that I saw had something else to tell me. And it was hard. Who do I believe?
Yeah.
Where do I go from here? But I would like to say to the women out there that are going through endo, I had endo. I didn't have severe pain, so I didn't really know I had it. But there's hope. There's belief for you. And sometimes you just have to take a step back and miracles happen. And I really had to think about that. Yes, my friends have had kids. Yes, they're all older. We didn't get to get pregnant together, which I always wanted to do. Now I ended up getting pregnant with another close friend, and both of our kids are 4 weeks apart. So that ended up working. So that was really hard, but it's okay. Like, if you're pregnant when all your friends are done with kids, they get to babysit when they're older. That's what I look at it.
Honestly, I just told
Maya's going to have a babysitter.
Yes.
These kids are going to be 15 and I'm going to be able to leave them like 18.
Everybody loves the baby.
Yeah.
They
all love her. And
the oldest kid, you're like, oh, you're so annoying now. Pass me that baby.
They love her.
Yeah.
Like, all of them love her. And, it's fine. It's, as everyone used to tell me, it's a season of life that you go through. And this was this different season of life for me. And yeah, it's different, but that's fine. I'm okay with it. I have my miracle girl. I'm blessed beyond belief. And I believe truly that every woman out there can get pregnant. May not be now, may not be the time that you want. And I think that's the problem, is that everyone has a strict time of like, I need to get pregnant here. I need to get pregnant in this year. I dropped all of that. I was like, it is what it is. And I think that really helped me move forward on things and stay positive. Because I will be honest, like, a lot of the stress does affect it too. And I think if you don't have any belief or hope, I feel like that's going to be harder for you to get pregnant too.
Yeah.
I believe in that.
Well, if you constantly have a timeline and you keep missing it, then you're
it's just devastating
again and again.
Yeah.
But then you pull back and you realize none of these were real timelines.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't failed anything.
And if honestly, the only other advice I could give is that if I could go back in time, I wish I advocated more for myself. I feel like I didn't do enough of that. I feel like I walked into this thinking like, this is easy. It's fine. Do an egg retrieval. It's going to get done. Like, it's going to be fine. I wish I had that knowledge prior, because I feel like now I don't know, but I feel like I probably wouldn't have to go through as much as I did. I feel like my story is like crazy. To be told that I have to go surrogacy and that I would never, ever get pregnant in January, to end up pregnant in that year in October. Like, I wanted to call every single doctor that told me that I couldn't get pregnant and be like, I told you so.
Yeah.
And that's when I believed and said, and you always said, like, you're still fertile. You're going to get pregnant.
I know you wanted to murder me after one of these calls. I was in goodness me. And I was like, honestly, like, your tube is clear. Your uterus is fine. You know that you can make embryos. Like, what are we stressing about?
Yeah.
You were like, and I gotta go. I gotta go, or I'm gonna kill you. And we live in the same city.
But at the same
that
time,
could be
too.
dangerous.
But you were right. You were right. You were so right. And I am so thankful that I took upon this colleague of mine to come and see you, because I honestly don't think I would be where I am without you. You are a huge impact in my whole journey. You helped me through so much. And I love you, Anne. So thank you.
I love you too.